Hi everyone, it's Becky here, 52 Baker. Welcome back. This week we'll be making a sugar carnation together. Now I use my flexible sugar flour paste. I'll link the course recipe down below in the description, but you can use traditional gum paste or you can use clay, whatever it is you like. This flower does have a lot of petals, but luckily it's the same process on repeat over and over. So just set up a good podcast or a Netflix and we'll get right into it. To start off, we're going to need to make our center, and so this you'll need to make a few days in advance because you want it to set up super firm. For that reason, I also recommend using a traditional gum paste recipe or a store-bought gum paste because they will set up the hardest. I'm going to use an 18 gauge carrier wire for this and create a hook on one end. And then using my gum paste, I'm going to roll out a log that is less than a centimeter thick. Once I have that, I'm going to cut it to about 4 centimeters. In all reality, from end to end, my log ended up being 5 centimeters for this video, and it worked out okay, but really it was almost a little bit too long, and so I think it's easier to add than it is to take away. So going forward, I would just keep it to 4 centimeters in length. Once you have your log, go ahead and thread your wire through. Make sure to add some edible glue beforehand, and once it's in the gum paste, pinch it to the wire and finish shaping it. It is going to get a little bit mushed up from holding it, so just roll it out and make sure you give it the shape that you like. And once you have it, set it off to the side to dry for a few days. Once your center is all dry, it's time to move on to the petals. Now for this flower, I'll be using 3 teardrop shaped cutters or rose cutters if that's how you know them. A small, a medium, and a large. The small is 2 centimeters wide by 2.5 centimeters tall. The medium is 2.5 by 3, and the large is 3 by 3.5. I'm going to start off with the small cutter and make 12 to 15 petals. Each size for this flower will have 12 to 15 petals. This is only a guide. You can do less if you want more of a bud. You can do more if you want a fuller, more open flower, but this is just to get you started so you know what I did. Once you have your cutters, go ahead and roll out your flower paste as thin as you're comfortable with and start punching out with the small cutter. Once all of my petals are cut out, I make sure that they're in my little Ziploc cover. And using the end of my Dresden tool, I'm going to pull out the edges of the top of each petal. This is going to give it the appearance that it has a jagged edge, which is what carnation flowers sort of look like. Once I have that, then using a flat tool, I'm going to thin out the ends of my flower petal. I don't want to thin out the entire flower petal because they're already very thin. So I'm just going to gently smooth out the top of the petal so that it looks like more of a gradual thinning out from the center to the ends, if that makes sense. Once all the petals are shaped and thinned, it's time to vein them. I'll be using a ranunculus veiner here because it has a up and down style vein that is very faint, and so I think it looks very natural for the carnation flower. You can always use a veining stick, but I find that it's a little bit more work, and this flower has so many petals that I'm just trying to lessen the burden. So I'll stick with the veiner for the rest of the petals. Once all of my small petals have veining, it's time to stick it to the center of our flower. My first petal, I'm going to go ahead and add edible glue to the tip of my flower center, and I'm going to wrap half of the petal from bottom to top all the way around the center. All of my petals here are going to be half on the center of the flower, half off. Once I have my first one, every petal after that, I'm sort of going to crinkle fold it against itself and then place it on my center of my flower. I want to look at how I'm placing this so that my petals are each looking a little bit different in how they're crinkled, and also some of them are fitting in with each other and making sure that they're not all looking uniform and the same. I want it to look a little more natural. So my best advice with that is just to not overthink it and just sort of place it on there, and however it sits, that's how it sits. Don't give it a second thought. You just move on to the next petal and trust that in the end it will all come together. Once all of your petals are on there, you can go ahead and set it to dry. I prefer it to dry upside down so none of my petals dry with a kink in them, and we can move on to the medium-sized petals. For the medium-sized petals, use the medium-sized cutter and make 12 to 15 petals following the exact same process as with the small petals, so I won't spend time going over that again. You just follow the same process. Once you've shaped and you've veined them, then it's time to add them to the center of your petal. We're going to follow the same process of crinkling the flower and adhering it that way, but you're going to move down just a level so that your flower starts to take more of a round shape, but now you have larger petals that are opening up. For these, I sort of skip around in sort of a triangle shape so that I don't get too perfectly round and I don't start to look very cookie cutter. I'm trying to force myself to not overthink it because I do overthink things sometimes. So maybe that'll help you also. For these petals, when I'm gluing them, again, they're so smushed together, they're so close to each other that I'll use glue up to about half the petal, but not more than that. And this will make sure that it's adhering to the center of my flower, that tube of gum paste, but also adhering a little bit to the other petals so it has some support, since we're not letting these petals dry fully before we place them on the flower. Once you add the last of the medium petals, you'll notice that you have a pretty cute looking carnation as is. You could stop here and move on to your calyx, or you can go on to the larger petals and make it a full open bloom. Either way, we're going to set this aside upside down to firm up a bit so that the glue has a chance to dry, and we're going to move on to the large petals. Using the large cutter, we'll cut another 12 to 15 petals and again follow the exact same process, so I won't show it again. You can go back and check the small petals if you need another reference. Now, once your large petals are ready, the only difference we're going to do is we're not going to place these on right away. We're going to give them a few minutes to firm up. So I like to sort of crinkle, smush them just a little bit so that they have extra shape and movement, and I put them on a wavy foam board to dry up a bit. If you're working with traditional gum paste, you'll have to keep a close eye on these to make sure they don't set up fully. But if you're using a clay or you're using my flexible flower paste, then you have more wiggle room. So work at your own pace. There's no rhyme or reason for my crinkling. I don't know where I'll be placing the exact petals just yet, but I want to make sure that they each look a little bit different and they have different movements. So I'm again trying to not overthink it and just smush them and place them and move on. Once they're about this dry, where you can move them, but they don't flop over when you're holding the base of the petal, that's when they're ready to be placed onto our carnation. The reason I want to wait until they get to this stage is because I'm going to have them bent outwards so that they're more open, so they really do need to hold their shape. We don't want them to flop over. If you're using gum paste and you're doing this while they're still wet, you could of course use supports, but I like avoiding the supports if possible because it just feels like an extra step. With these petals, I'm going to try to fit them in any open spaces because they are a little bit more dry, so it is a little more challenging to get them to lay flat since they've started setting up. I'm going to give them a good squish, which is where it's helpful to have that strong gum paste center because you're not going to ruin anything. And then I just move on. I'm trying to fit these petals because they're a little more dry based on their shape. So any crevice or corner that they fit into, that's where they're going to go. If a certain petal that I have doesn't fit, then I'll just leave it for later. It'll fit later on and I grab a new petal. I'm again placing them in sort of a triangle shape so that I don't just go in a big circle. I want some to stand out a little bit more than others, and so I find that working in a little bit of a triangular shape helps me achieve that, and again makes it look a little more natural. Where I place these petals is also going to be right below the medium petals, not by a whole lot because these are going to be bent out, and so I still want that circular shape. And if I move these too far down and they're bent out, then it's going to look like my circle is sort of coming in, and that's not the look I'm going for. So they're just barely under the base of the medium petals, and they're bending out. And there you go. The last of your petals, the hardest part of this flower, is out of the way, and we can move on to the calyx now. Go ahead and set this to dry upside down and we'll get our next gum paste ready. Now for the calyx, it has sort of a thicker bottom calyx, so I'm going to roll out a log of green gum paste, and I'll start off with something that's about 1 centimeter thick. I'll measure the height that I need my calyx to be against the flower itself, and this green gum paste is going to cover that entire white log of gum paste that we made the center of our flower. This will be too much, but I can always pinch off what I don't need. Once I have sort of a cone shape, then I create a center at the larger end of my cone, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out little triangles so that I have 6 pointed tops. It's going to look like the top of a crown. Once I have that, using a Dresden tool, I'm going to press out the crown tops against my finger. I don't want them to be perfectly triangular. I want them to be more of a rounded triangle with a tip. So that's what I'm trying to achieve with my Dresden tool. Next, I'm just going to do a test run to see if it fits, and it doesn't. It's too tight of a squeeze. So I'm going to go ahead and, using my fondant tool, I'm going to run it through the center to open that center up a bit more. I'll do another test run, and this time it fits nicely. So that's the size I'm looking for. Don't want to squeeze it on too tight because it doesn't have glue, so it won't adhere. So I'll pop it right off, add some glue to the center of my flower. I'll add a little bit to the petals also at the base, just to make sure the green adheres everywhere. And then I'll slide the green piece right back on. And using my fingers, I'm going to make sure it's really snug on there. Again, any excess, I'll just go ahead and pinch off, and I'll continue working this with my fingers to make sure it's adhered very well and it's not too thick. Once I'm happy with it, using my Dresden tool, I'm going to score from the tip of every calyx leaf, the center of it, all the way down to the base of the calyx. Once I've done that, then I'll go ahead and add some extra scores along the side of each of those center scores. This is just to add more texture. I don't have anything to vein this, so my Dresden tool is going to have to do the job. Once I'm happy with that, I'll go ahead and set it off to dry for just a bit. Next, I'm going to make the bottom leaves on the bottom of the calyx. So using no specific size, a little piece of gum paste, maybe the size of a grain of rice, I'm going to form it into a teardrop shape and then just roll it flat. And on the pointed end, I'll bring it together to make it even more pointy. I'm going to make 6 of these, and then I'll individually glue them to the bottom of the calyx. Now you'll notice here in the video, I have somewhat of a stem, but I'm not going over that in this video because most of the sugar flowers don't show the stem. So if you're interested in how I do that process, drop me a comment and let me know. I can do a video on that separately. But for the most part, the sugar flowers don't show much stem, so I didn't want to waste video time with that. The 6 calyx petals on here, I'll just do my best to evenly spread them out, but because I'm not measuring, because there's no cutter for any of this, some of them will overlap, so I just do my best to sort of thin out the bottom so that it fades away and blend each one into each other so that there's not harsh lines that make it look like it doesn't belong together. And that's it. Now you have a beautiful carnation flower. You can make it any color you like. You can dust it however you like. I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you found this useful or helpful at all, please don't forget to give the video a like and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below and I'll make sure to get right back to you. If not, I will see you guys in the next video.